Mine any lower.
I brought Joe down to size.
Okay, we ready to get started?
Instructions on sound,
Yeah.
Everyone should be muted.
computer muted.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
We got it?
Yes.
Perfect. You can start screen sharing whenever you are ready for that.
Where's that speaker?
Welcome everyone to the Government Transition Advisory Committee. Today is Monday, July 10th, and we will be here from 6 to 8 p.m. Committee members and community members listening in, welcome to the 6th meeting of the Government Transition Advisory Committee. My name is Julia Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Community Participation and Engagement Manager for the transition. Lori is going to facilitate tonight's meeting. David was not able to come tonight. So before we begin, I have an announcement. Elizabeth Mazzara Myers resigned from the committee due to her work schedule. She just hasn't been able to make the meetings work with her job. Leah Benson has become a full member and Bill Kinsey has become an alternate member. I will share that by email too, just to remind folks, and we'll update our website to show that same information. Next slide, please. So I'm just gonna take a moment to go over Zoom logistics. This is a hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded for later viewing, and a copy of the recording will be posted on the city's transition webpage under past meetings and events. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning, ASL, and Spanish interpretation available. To access Spanish interpretation, you can click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. To access closed captioning, click on the CC button on the bottom right side of the screen. Committee members, please take a moment to change your chat settings to everyone so folks listening in can follow along. Please remember that the meeting chat is part of the public record. Community members listening in, we have the Zoom Q&A feature available. You can submit questions or comments through the Q&A function. We may not be able to answer all the questions today, but they do become a part of the meeting record. At today's meeting, we will be taking verbal public comment, but just as a reminder, folks can submit written public comments through the comment form online on our website or by emailing transition@portlandoregon.gov. Just always a reminder about hybrid meetings. They have opportunities and challenges. So please try not to talk unless you raise your Zoom hand, whether you're virtual or in person, and you've been called on. It helps to make sure that everyone can participate. So I'm now going to turn it over to Lori to go over tonight's agenda. Next slide, please.
Question. Hands up. It's the chat selection. There isn't an everyone. There's hosts and panelists. Does that exclude the public?
It would if that's what your choice is. I'll take a look when Lori
Okay.
goes on.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Okay, agenda for tonight, we're going to spend the first 10 minutes on committee business. After that, we'll move directly into public comment and engagement. Then we will hear a presentation from the Community Engagement Work Group and ask the committee to vote to recommend the Transition Community Engagement Plan to the Chief Administrative Officer for consideration and adoption. We'll spend the bulk of the meeting on city organization and future improvements. We'll discuss how we manage offline inputs from.
Lori, will you speak louder? Some of the audience members can't really hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll speak louder. We'll discuss how we manage offline inputs from committee members. And before we adjourn our meeting today, we'll close with a brief review of our next steps. Next slide, please. Okay, for committee business, there we go. The excused absences are David Burnell and Bill Farber, unable to attend tonight. Otherwise, we should have full attendance. Our first order of business is to approve the June 6th meeting summary. Does anyone have any revisions before I ask for a motion to approve? Okay, would someone like to motion to approve the June 6th meeting
So
summary?
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Our second order of business is to approve the June 20th meeting summary. Does anyone have any revisions they'd like to add before I take a motion to approve? I'd like to move.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, the approved meeting summaries will be posted on the committee webpage. Our third order of committee business is to review the working agreements approved at our last meeting. Next slide, please. So I'll go through these just to remind all of us. In discussions, challenge ideas rather than individuals, offer constructive suggestions, approach different opinions with curiosity and seek to understand, keep the needs and concerns of the local community and the larger region at the forefront of the work, arrive on time and prepare to the best of your ability, let the group know if you're unable to attend a meeting, and the co-chairs will aim to incorporate tools for breathers, keep multitasking to a minimum, keep focus on the objectives of the meetings, utilize co-chairs to note additional topics for discussion by submitting topics in writing via email. Let's see, next slide, please. Honor the decisions of the group. Contribute to the overall success of the group by finding ways to participate that best meets your needs. Step up, step back, collectively work to ensure that every member who wants to be heard is heard. Embrace conflict and work with your fellow committee members and staff to find ways to give each other feedback. The co-chairs will aim to incorporate various feedback tools and use I statements. I'll now pass it back to Julia to introduce the public comment.
So it's now time to take public comment. As always, community members were asked to sign up ahead of time on our website. We had one person sign up. After the person who signed up is done testifying, we will ask if anyone else wants to testify who's either here in person or virtual. Everyone will have 3 minutes to provide testimony. I will keep, well, my phone and I will keep track of your time. And we're going to begin with Carolyn. And Carolyn, if you want, you can come sit in my spot so folks can look at you. And you can start whenever you're ready.
My name is Carolyn Bubert, and I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Portland. We have about 270 members, and I'd say 40 or 50 are pretty engaged in this process, so we're fans. And we have 3 requests for sort of transparency, accountability issues. One is these questions and answers that you all are asking and the city is answering. We got copies, but it was because we requested them. And we request that they be posted so that anyone can get to them and that we can link to them and spread the word, because these are just really helpful. Second, would you, if you can remember to say your name before you speak, because if the slides are up, we can't see who's who. And also, and the people watching the recording session, they want to, it's best if you just say your name if you can. And third, the chat. I know chat is useful, but if people are watching the recording, they can't see the chat. And if people are listening in audio, they can't see the chat. So could you either minimize chat or somehow verbally say what's going on in chat, so people get the full experience. So thank you for your work.
Time to spare. Thank you, Carolyn. So just want to wait for a moment to see if anyone else would like to testify. And again, if you are virtual, you could raise your hand. By 7 seconds. Okay, thank you. And thank you again to Carolyn for testifying. So next slide, please. Or back to public comment reporting slide. So I'll begin, but as a reminder, if you go to the next slide, public comment reports are available on the transition website under the documents tab. And the public comment reports, unlike this slide, have the public comments in their entirety. So you can go online and you can read them. Since we last met, the June public comment report has become available, so it's on our website. This is just kind of the high level, the overall number of public comments, and then the public comments by topic. I think this is an interesting slide. So we got 609 public comments in the month of June alone. And before that, we had 330-ish public comments total from the election through the end of May. It's fantastic to see, and it is driven really by two things. The proposal out by the Salary Commission and the proposal out by the Independent District Commission. So fantastic appreciation to Nicole for tracking all of those public comments. It's pretty fantastic. Next slide, please. So in addition to kind of showing you the public comments like this, I want to introduce you to a new slide. In the draft community engagement plan, we list projections for types of engagement. So you'll start seeing this at least on a monthly basis where you see the projections versus the to-date actuals. You know, moving forward, we can spend a little bit more time here. Right now, I just kind of want to introduce you to it. I think it's a way for us to think about, are we on track, right? Are there any items that we're not on track about? Anything sort of just interesting to note or to highlight? Again, for me, for this most recent period, you know, just the huge increase in public comments and people being responsive to the proposals out from our two independent commissions is the most significant thing of note. Any kind of high level questions about this slide before we move on?
I actually have a question that's not entirely related to this, but I'm thinking about our tracking of who we've talked to and that you know, that kind of, I don't know if it's inward facing at this point and then aggregated into something like this. But, you know, I think I've had the privilege to attend to multiple of the Independent Districting Commission meetings at this point. Oh, and sorry, by the way, my name is Zach Curl. And I just wanted to state that I think from those conversations might be worth our while to recognize that we've attended those, or, you know, beyond in some way of tracking, because I do feel like the conversations and the discussion has a potential of influencing how I feel and how I'm advising. But I don't know how that is reflected, because I may be misremembering, but I think that it was intended to be non-city organized functions for that work tracking. So I don't know.
Did you want me to respond?
Yeah,
I mean,
if you have
there's a
response,
question
yeah.
and there's sort of some
Yeah,
comments in
sorry.
there. So both the projections and the actuals on this slide include committee engagement activities. They do not include, this slide does not include all engagement by either this committee or the transition team or the district commission or anyone else. These are just the projections that we chose to include in the community engagement plan. So these are ones that we'll just track monthly and present to you all. There is much other engagement that happens, and I would, actually, if we go to the next, well, I know some other folks have questions, but on the next slide is a high level reporting of some of the committee's engagement to date. I continue to encourage everyone, there's no such thing as over reporting your engagement. You know what I mean? So if you're ever wondering, I wonder if I should report this, fill out the form. You know, it's a couple boxes. It feeds into a spreadsheet. We can see it in all of its richness. And some folks have let me know through that form, I attended a district commission hearing, right? You may not see it reflected on this projection chart, but this is really just a snapshot of some high level engagement by numbers.
Juliet?
I'm Juliet Hyams. I use she, her pronouns. I'm just curious how the projections were arrived at, and does it mean anything, or does it matter that some of them have almost been reached, yet, you know, we're looking at a target of March, almost 2 years away?
How were the projections read? This is Julia on staff. Really based on the transition plan and then understanding what type of engagement was planned. You can see in, and I know the type is small, but for a lot of the lines, there'll be an italicized line underneath. So the first line says community survey responses, and then underneath in italics says code 2.08, independent district commission, salaries, et cetera. So that is the guesses, the projections of what we would do community surveys about. So you'll see that 3 of the 4 of them are open and 2 of the 4 are closed, right? So things happen at different time periods. When you look at the second row, people receiving monthly emails, well, that we expect to go up in a similar level over time. So it really just depends what the thing is about where we are, right? So actually we're very under if you look at briefings and presentations, but I expect that that line will exponentially grow as you all go out and start briefing and presenting in community, and you'll see that the bulk of those are actually from this committee doing that work. So, and you may have already experienced this, but the transition is not always at the same level, right? Look at this month of public comments. We are not going to see 609 public comments every month for the duration of the transition. This will be the busiest time of public comment, I imagine, we project, right? Because of what's happening right now. So again, they're projections, and they're also based on experience, like the Charter Commission, what the District Commission has seen thus far, et cetera. Thanks.
Juanita? You're on mute, Juanita.
I apologize. I always do that. Anyway, so Julia, is there any way that we could do, that the city could do some qualitative data out of all of this quantitative data that you're collecting? I think it would be interesting to see when there's community survey responses or people, that get together to listen in sessions or, that to kind of to know for our knowledge. I think it will help us a lot to know what percentage comments are being in favor, or which percentage of comments are opposed to the proposal or to the present issue that is being discussed in these meetings. So is there a possibility to do that?
You know, with some things, I mean, not all community engagement is asking yes or no questions, right? A lot of it is not dichotomous, you know, do you support this or not? Yes or no. You know, some things lend themselves more to that than others. With maybe the salary commission proposal, there could be some, I mean, there's some quantitative data in response to a survey. So a little bit TBD, and we can talk more about it. I mean, I would encourage, you know, you have access to the 609 public comments, for example, in June. I mean, I encourage folks to spend some time with the public comment. Often people aren't, I think, commenting just to say yay or nay, but to offer their input. We could draw themes from it. I would encourage us all to do that, but we all may draw somewhat different themes as well.
Yeah, the reason I was asking the question is because I went to one of the, when the first presentation of the salary commission, and we hear some of the feedback from people online and some people, you know, and so it was very interesting to hear people's comments from the community. And I was wondering if that can be captured a little bit, and is they're taking the minutes of the meeting or somehow, I don't know. Just from, and I understand you're totally correct that not everything can be quantified, qualitative data, because it's difficult. We're not asking the right questions, but it's very obvious when people are not agreeing with something, or they're saying, no, we don't like that idea. But anyway, so you can let us know later on if there's any possibility to some of those areas that can be done. And I think it's going to apply more, like you say, just to the committee's work, to the commissions, to the different groups that are doing their, they're doing the research in those two areas, the salaries, and then the other one is, God, I forgot. Anyway, so thank you, Julia.
One more, Fred.
Yes, thank you.
I thought I was.
What's
That guy.
Here. That's muted. Okay, I see. Okay. Fred Neal, they, to both Zach's and Juanita's concerns. We don't have an opportunity as a committee to talk about what we learn in our engagements, like at the district. It was Juanita, Lori, and I think attended the Salary Commission's one public comment hearing. And we're very enlightened by what was said and what the responses were by the commission members. But we don't have a chance to report back to everyone else on the committee. What we heard, what we learned, what our thoughts were about it. So that we can teach each other. So we're not all going, you know, Zach might attend every meeting of the district things and he's well up to speed on it, and 3/5 of the rest of us don't know anything really about what the responses have been. I like, Julia, I hadn't even thought about looking at, isn't in the transition website itself, the public transition website, all public comments that have been submitted electronically are there. Does that include the Salary Commission survey? Jamie, is it?
I believe Nicole added that, yes.
Okay, so that's just a point I'd like to make, that I think we could help each other a lot better as we proceed. I mean, there aren't going to be many more hearings other than district, right? And ours. Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. And actually, this might address Fred's point a little bit. So just as a reminder again, committee members, thank you for logging the engagement that you do outside of public meetings. I think it is important for transparency. We are going to report on this at every meeting. However, this slide does not show every engagement that you have logged. If you happen to talk to an individual and had a good conversation, thank you for tracking it. It might not show up here. I'm sure there are other examples. And as Fred mentioned, in the future, we do want to spend some time reflecting on experiences that folks have had during this engagement. So at our meeting next week, we're going to look at what monthly community engagement reporting looks like. And there will be suggestions in there. It's also in the community engagement plan that is reflections on the themes, or to Juanita's point, right? What have we been hearing and learning from folks over the past month? And that will be an opportunity to hear from GTAC members as well. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Zach and Amy to introduce our next agenda item. Next slide, please.
Great. Hi, everybody. Zach Curl again. So at our last meeting several weeks ago, we, as the community engagement work group, heard all of your feedback, which was very, very helpful. We kind of convened with Julia to work into the engagement plan revisions. And so we are basically here to hopefully vote on the revised community engagement plan one, and that vote would be to recommend it to the city's chief administrative officer for his consideration. And two, there were many very good questions about kind of operational logistics for us and like how we work in pairs, that kind of thing. And so we want to answer some of those operational questions that we had a chance to brainstorm as a work group. So I will turn it over to Amy for the next slide.
I'm going to talk us through the engagement plan revisions, the specific items like on the plan that was sent out. So these are the changes that our team made. I'll just go down a list and we can go deeper into any of these if we need to. So our role is to augment the city's engagement strategy, just acknowledging that we're not the only ones doing engagement on this matter. Engagement opportunities may be granted from the committee or the community. We recognize that it's important to have kind of like both ways. Committee will identify and address our gaps in engagement. Engagement doesn't have to be in pairs. That was a recommendation which had been previously stated, but there was some reflection that that wasn't a good fit or wasn't necessarily practical in all cases. And then describe what providing engagement and opportunities in partnership may mean. I think we like enumerated that out a bit. And the city is responsible for sharing how input influences implementation. So reflecting the concern we heard from the committee that we want to know if our engagement means anything. I'll hand it back over to Zach to talk about the how to quickly.
I think we want to maybe vote on
Oh,
the changes
we can go
first.
vote on the changes.
We're going to see if there's any.
Or
further
if there are any,
discussion.
if there's any further discussion or questions about the revisions that you hopefully had a chance to see.
Joe's got a question.
I apologize if this isn't the right time to raise this. I don't know when the right time is, but two questions have come up for me since we discussed this the last time about our role. One of them is that there's been I don't know if you'd call it a subcommittee, but a group of committee members anyway, that have been meeting with Jamie Duhamel regarding community input on organizational structure. And what we learned is that they're really not looking for community input. They're looking to do community education. And it feels like there's a real gap in community education, that there are a whole lot of questions that come up again and again and again regarding organizational structure. Because they had planned to do this one meeting, there's an opportunity to do information about that, and particularly about the values that the city is trying to achieve in the organizational structure. But it feels like there are questions that come up again and again regarding the role of the council, the role of mayor, a whole bunch of things, and that it would be valuable to put together just a series of either presentations or informational sessions or something that would give people an opportunity, if they've got those questions, to go somewhere and get them answered. So again, I don't know if that fits into this discussion at all. And the second thing that's come up for me is what's our role in sort of advice, feedback to others who are doing community engagement. I have some really serious concerns, and we're way behind the curve on this. I mean, by the time we got even organized, it was too late to impact this, but I have some pretty serious concerns about the way that the district commission is gathering community input. I won't go into those because I think the details aren't important, but is part of our role in community engagement to advise and provide feedback to others who are doing community engagement regarding the transition.
Those don't feel like they're related to approving this engagement plan, I don't think. Is that anything that you discussed in your subcommittee that you want to consider making any changes to this plan? I'm not saying we shouldn't discuss this, Joe. I just don't know that it's part of this topic and we should maybe table it.
Yeah, well, there are two pieces in this. I think the first piece to response to, and maybe I'm misrepresenting what you're saying, Joe, so correct me if I'm wrong, but having some materials and or kind of presentation slides, if you will, for those of us going out into the community for like a basic civics lesson, if you will, of the you know, where you can anticipate service delivery resources, like what are the responsibilities of the mayor and city council in this new form of government. Those are certainly areas that we hope to provide resources ongoing. We're, working with staff, of course, that will help us develop those materials. But I do think that that is, operationally what we intend. And I was kind of going back to our transition engagement plan draft at this point, and just reflecting on, we have these kind of engagement foci in the fourth column, right? And that can be our tool as those who are maybe involved in the community engagement work group and or the city staff for helping direct the resources that we would want in order to have appropriate engagement. Maybe the civic engagement piece and like the responsibilities of different bureaus or whatnot is kind of across the entirety of our 2 years as a committee. I'm seeing a nod from Fred, but like that maybe can we have like as a, I think that can be something that we provide as like a residual resource that can always be available. And then the group can be adaptive if this is a community that has not historically been engaged in City Hall. That might be something that you bring to the table. The second piece that Joe brought up, I don't think is necessarily something that we should be talking about with this engagement strategy.
And take note of that and discuss whether we need to find a forum for that or how to direct that kind of feedback to. We'll take note of that. Juanita?
Yes, I just wanted to go back and just link the importance of the comments that we were making before. If you go to the bullets, the last bullet in the engagement plan revisions, the city is responsible for sharing how input influences implementation. I want to know how the city can show that if the city is only receiving numerical data count about how many people attended or how many presentations were made. So nothing that we can do right now, but I want to make sure that it's in the record and that we get an answer about that. Because I just want to know how that is going to happen.
Thank you. Bill?
Oh, thank you. I wanted to add to, the observation that there'd be resources to support the community engagement meetings. I'm reasoning that if we don't have a script or resources, then there won't be consistency or uniformity in what we present, and the engagement meetings might evolve to just a listening session, and at least some participants are going to want some guidance as to what's happening. That my comment does not require a revision to the plan, but it's relevant to how we go forward.
We'll be talking about that on the next slide.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Fred?
Yes, thank you. Fred Neal. I concur that we need some materials to distribute when we make presentations. At least some of the slides that are in the transition plan, they're very informative about just the major change that we're making that the voters decided on. That's a good start because that's a entree to make a presentation or some conversation. 1 or 2 meetings ago, when the district flyer came out with the list of the district commissions flyers came out with scheduled hearings, I asked if there were extra copies that we could distribute, like at the grocery store, a bulletin board, or the community center. And I said they were being printed in-house, but then they were never distributed. And so I don't know, and half of them are over. So I don't know quite how that's going to work. We do need some kind of written materials. At least I know of several of my engagements one-on-one, I've just had to copy the website transition, City of Portland, transition, \transition, so that they could go there. And then they can find the advisory committees, who's who, what the hearings are, where you can make public comment. All of that is there, but it'd be nice to have it, that we could leave with somebody so that they can take it home and do their research or make their public comments through that venue. And the sooner the better. Otherwise, I feel like I can't go out really and talk to people without something that I feel comfortable they're going to have some material to help them be better citizens.
Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.
So we're running a little bit behind. We have one more slide and I've got one more question, and we also need to vote. So Jane, if you want to ask your question, then we'll try to move to a vote.
Yes, thank you very much. I know this is sort of a parking lot off the main plan, but I do want to support Juanita and Fred and Bill on what they've said. I mean, Juanita sent a very, very thoughtful email over the weekend, which really said, if we are going to make recommendations to the city about anything in any direction, we need to know how we're going to do that. But the number one thing is that we need to, as a committee, have heard lots and experienced lots of public comment. And if we're all running off to meetings, I do appreciate, Julia, that maybe even a larger part of our upcoming meeting should be, what is it that we've heard? Where have we been and what have we heard? And I think that really, when Nicole or Julia send us all of this sort of like pre-work for the meeting, the number one thing should be that we need to go and mine that community information. Wherever that's being collected, we should all read that, because this is our number one thing that we have to do. We have to really hear what people are saying. And I think I said earlier in a meeting that I'll know whether or not we are worth our salt, and if the city means what it means, if and when the whole thing on salaries is wrapped up, and it's wrapping really soon. And I mean, I went to look at the community comments, and there's a lot of let's not do this way comment. And so what is the city going to do with that? So I do think that even though we're talking about the plan, The plan really talks about how we get out there and present and listen. But I do think the big hole that Juanita highlighted over the weekend was, how do we feed back? But more importantly, what are we hearing and what do we want to do that as a committee? What do we want to do with that? So I think that this is a big piece. Thank you.
All right, are folks ready to go ahead and vote on proposing this plan to the city? All right, so let's see.
Do you want a motion?
Yes.
I move
Thank you.
that we
I'm gonna ask for a
adopt
motion.
The committees, the subcommittee's engagement plan revisions.
Thank you, Fred.
Second.
A second, thank you. Okay, because this is a recommendation to the Chief Administrative Officer, our bylaws require a roll call vote and the minutes to reflect each committee member's position. 8 or more members are required for a recommendation decision for our bylaws. So I'm going to go through the roll, and if you would either say yay or nay. So Leah and David are absent. So is Bill. Next we have Mani Rule. Yay. Lori Heffley, yay. Joe Hertzberg,
Yes,
Juliet Hyams,
Aye.
Zach Pearl,
Yes.
Destiny Magana Pablo,
Yes.
Bobby Munoz,
Yes.
Fred Neal,
Yes.
Terrence Pascal, he's absent. Amy
Yes.
Rendell,
Yes.
Juanita Santana,
Yes.
Amy Wood.
Aye.
All right, the tally is 11 yeses. So that means it passes. So thank you. We'll come to the committee to let you know if the Chief Administrative Officer has any changes to the plan as recommended. Now I'll turn it back to Zach from the Community Engagement Work Group to go over next steps in our engagement.
Thank you. Oh, can we jump to there? Yeah, thanks. All right, so thank you for the questions about operations. I think that we will continue to refine and improve our own engagement. And this will, of course, I think also feed into how the city can be more effective engaging and maybe answer in part one of Juanita's points. But we're trying to think about how to see out the proposal that we all kind of agreed and workshopped at our last meeting. So reminder of this that we just voted and approved on within our draft. So this is every quarter or 3 months, we're going to, as pairs, meet with members of the community. And the way that we're going to attempt to do that is through a kind of engagement spreadsheet, if you will, which or an outreach spreadsheet, which I believe was shared. So you should have had a chance to see that. And so every 3 months, we'll have staff help us in ensuring that committee members are, every single committee member has their name. And the intention is that you'll be identifying a group to have an engagement with. So for example, with our next 2 months, I reached out to the North Portland Neighborhood Services Board to schedule a meeting, and we would be adding, once we have a date and time identified, we'd be adding that. And that with that clarity, if everybody does that, then somebody has the opportunity to sign up with that individual. So on the, I think, 7th column, there's a column called pair. And so in this particular example for August 7th, a Monday, I just confirmed the time today, somebody can sign up to be my pair. And in order to do 2, I then also need to pair up with someone. And so that's the way that we're gonna try to accomplish the pairing feat. And that, I think it will also be an opportunity for us to kind of mix and mingle. It's not that we're wedded to having one person that you're paired with at all times. And you can make sure that it works within your schedule. So I do think it will be important that you proactively reach out as soon as that 3 months start, and or just keep going with it. I think it will become second nature in this process. The other piece of this, we wanted to ensure that half of our outreach was with groups that represent communities historically left out of City Hall decision-making. So we've added a column to that as well. So the example of Portland Neighborhood Services Board, that is not, but if I'm hoping to schedule a meeting, for example, with Street Roots and workers in Street Roots, that would be reflected as yes, and that way the city would easily be able to track, and then we can internally ensure that we're achieving the proposal's aims. So that's kind of the logistics part of this and utilizing the outreach spreadsheet. Maybe want to take a brief pause and ask if there was any questions about that before jumping into the training and materials. Okay, so with training and materials, oh, yes, Joe's got a question, Joe.
Yeah. Zach, one thing that occurs to me is that all of us live in a neighborhood and we could each take our own neighborhood association.
It's, I think it's a good example of how we can, what Jane has been preaching, get comfortable with being out in the community and engaging and listening to those questions, maybe feeling like if there are questions we can't answer, we know them maybe well enough, our own neighbors well enough to be comfortable saying, we will get back to you with more information and or having a second follow-up meeting. But I think as we're building confidence, but also our own awareness of what's going on and all of the different details and what kind of questions might be asked, we will be able to effectively have good, productive meetings and community engagement where we can feel satisfied that we've answered some of the maybe more challenging questions that arise. Yeah, but I do think that this is like, great opportunity to start very quickly, get on people's calendars. We're running over time. So I just want to mention that we're working with staff on the training piece. So we've provided some specific recommendations of what we think will be needed out of the training and given those recommendations to the Office of Equity and Human Rights. And then the order of materials. So I will take it on myself to work with staff to ensure that maybe we can, both get the digital materials like presentations and things that might be useful for these conversations prepared ahead of time and have maybe a folder within our shared drive, if you will, to be able to reference easily. But also, I think the question that Fred, you raised, having something physical is very meaningful. And I also agree that that would be a useful tool to direct people to ways of effectively providing public comment and the like. So I think we have an outstanding question about budget to the city staff, but also like how we can effectively get that maybe at our future meeting. So we can work with production. Yeah.
And I think a clarification is that we had discussed of not only getting the materials together, but between, we have about a month off after next week's meeting, that we would do maybe some train the trainers, like go through the presentation materials so that folks could hear it being presented, ask questions, get comfortable so that they've got it. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Process question in the chat.
Okay, so
I can
do you want to
defer
just read
later.
it out?
Sure. My name's Money, and this can be for later to discuss, but just wondering who's managing the outreach spreadsheet, and then if it can be merged with the organization spreadsheet as a good starting point of who we all have connections with, and then makes us accountable to reaching out to those organizations.
That's a great idea. Thanks, Marty. And I think that's something that Julie can effectively do. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready to move on to the next agenda topic. Okay, we have Becky Tilson and Jamie Duhamel from the transition team are with us tonight to talk more about the community engagement plans for the city organization and future improvement projects. But before we discuss community engagement plans, we wanted to hold 15 minutes for questions or comments about the city organization and future improvement projects. Since we last discussed this part of the transition, you received copies of the programmatic assessments, a copy of an employee update email from Michael Jordan, as well as clarification about the committee's role in relation to this project. So I want to open it up for folks to ask any questions or submit any comments regarding that before we do the presentation on community engagement for this. Fred.
Thank you, Fred Neal. I've been thinking about this. I remember the first presentation that we had with our first meeting. Mr. Jordan mentioned that there won't be 28 euros by the time they come to hire a professional administrator. We have a unsiloed, consolidated, unitary administration for the bureaucracy of the city of Portland. But after that, we're left in the blank, I think. The directors of the different bureaus have their own workshops where we're not allowed to attend and even to hear what their ideas are. I think my concern historically and why I supported a manager council form of government is that the bureaus were running the electeds basically, and they were off on their own. I've had former city commissioners become bureau directors and tell me that and think that that was funny. It's not funny. And it shows why the charter had to change. The public expects, and I think many of us voted for change along those lines. The public expects to be brought into what the thought is, so that we don't have, and I'm not casting aspersions, I'm just thinking that raises a flag for me that you have bureau directors who want to maintain their autocracy, if you will, however much authority they have over their own assignments and services that they provide the citizenry, and may very well want to be and this goes to Destiny's comment that was offline, that perhaps they're going to try and preserve their powers, and we don't know what the public really wants between now and when the decisions are being made. It's almost as though, and I've heard this comment from other committee members, that we are just to listen, agree or not, but then just transmit that knowledge without sharing our expertise and our collective wisdom with the administration as they proceed to reorganize. I know it's a lot of stress. I know for instance, I'd like to know about the change management, how that's going, at least, how that's set up, so that, because I'm concerned about employees. I'm sure that many of them feel stressed out, they don't. And I'm sure the transition team is doing what they can to reach out to them, but we could use that information as well to know, if we know a city employee, we can hold their hand and say, it's gonna be okay. That's where I am on it. I'm feeling a little useless. I'm happy to inform voters and non-voters. I've always been pro get out there and register to vote and vote. I want informed Portlanders to feel comfortable with this transition and to feel like they've had some meaningful input since the election for the charter change up to the present. That brings up like the salary commission, they're not accountable to anyone. They're not even accountable to, and I don't know why the charter commission decided that this was a freewheeling, independent, autonomous group that would make this decision regardless of what the public input is, regardless of what the elected's view of the matter is. And it's unappealable. The response when I raised that question after the salary commission's meeting was that, well, there's gonna be another charter commission 10 years from now and they can change it. Well, and make who accountable for what decisions. And I'm done.
I'm not sure, was there a specific?
That's no, it's just a comment that we're here.
Destiny.
Yes, thank you, Destiny Magaña Pablo. I wanted to, Fred brought this up that I read Michael Jordan's employee update and it mentioned deputy city administrators and I had questions about that.
Yeah.
How many proposed positions are you expecting? And also, isn't it essential to have that role? Because, you know, a lot of those concerns in the public from the salary commission is like, you are hiring, the wage is too much and bureaus are being cut in funding. And there's a negative reaction. To me, now reading it again, the report, you know, one of my concerns is more barriers through bureaucracy, less accountability, more administration bloat. That wouldn't do well with voters. I think if the directors are to report to the city administrator, why should there be an intermediary there? Especially if we're trying to, you know, conglomerate bureaus, make it more manageable, support, you know, staff the day-to-day. Don't understand why there's deputies in between that for building. It just doesn't seem necessary. But if it is necessary, one of the things we had brought up in our previous meeting is why would we have 12 city councilors that represent districts who then cannot address the concerns of their constituents when it comes to servicing? If this is essential, can we create an opportunity for these proposed positions to support that bridging between constituent concerns and the representation that they have in city council to the city administrator?
So I heard how many,
Mhm.
is it necessary, and can we, Becky Tilson, she, her pronouns, thanks for having us
Oh, no,
tonight.
let's speak up too.
Oh, okay, thank you for the reminder. How many are they necessary and can they serve that bridging function between council and bureaus? Are those, did I get all three of those questions?
Of council bureaus also, wait. Oh, why do we need them? Because there's gonna be directors who are accountable, so maintaining accountability to ensure that people who are responsible for providing the people who are paid to do it are responsible and it's clear for the citizens to know who's making the decisions and who to communicate to. The accountability part.
Do you want me to answer now or go to
Yep,
the, okay,
yes.
okay. So how many, we don't know yet. That's part of the conversations that are happening right now is how many are necessary. I think really connected to that is what is their role gonna be? So we've talked a lot about the role of the deputy as kind of a standard setter. So let's say we have sort of a standard way of delivering a service across the organization, whether it's asset management or engagement or whatever it is. And then we have the subject matter expertise in the bureaus who can apply those standard practices that exist across the city to their subject matter area, their area of expertise. That's one of the things that the deputy city administrator could do. I don't know, I think we shared with you the phase 2 programmatic assessment guidance, which was sort of what the conversations are right now over the months of June and July. And a big topic in that sort of agenda, syllabus, whatever you want to call it, was the role of the deputy city administrator. So we've talked about sort of a management role, kind of a vertical role, like you have a deputy in charge of public works and they're in charge of the 3 public works bureaus or however many end up in that service area. And they're responsible for the activities in that of those bureaus. And then we've also talked about this horizontal function of working as a team, right? You have the city administrator and X number of deputies that need to set standards for the entire city and need to hold the city accountable to delivering on the goals and
vision of the city, right? So they have a team that's responsible for both managing vertically and then providing horizontal coordination. Another example might be citywide communications that, right now we do communications kind of in lots of different bureaus, and we have a unified comms group at OMF, but we also have communications experts everywhere in the city. Maybe one of the deputies, their role is to ensure some consistent communication across the entire city. We've heard repeatedly that community members think of the city as one city. They're like, I did a lot of outreach for BES and I go out there and they say, tell me about the roads. And I'm like, well, I only know about sewers. That's so frustrating. It's frustrating for me. And I imagine it's frustrating to people that I spoke to. So having some shared standards and some shared information, I think could be a real benefit. So the question of how many they're going to be is still up in the air. This question of whether they're going to be funded from existing FTE is also up in the air. We're trying not to add a bunch of FTE, but we're also trying to be conscious of making sure that we're delivering on our core services. So that conversation is also up in the air. And your fourth question.
Relating with the council.
Oh, yeah, so that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that one, but I think that's a really good question. I can bring back to Tate, who I know you all know, who's been working on that kind of roles and responsibilities. That seems to be, I have a list of like my head questions that need to be answered. And that is one of them. When you look at like mayor, council, city administrator, deputies, maybe even add bureau directors in there, what does that relationship look like? What are the lines of communication? What are the lines of authority? It's a great question. And I think when we think about change management, which I have tons of thoughts about, it's going to be relevant there too. Yeah.
Follow up for quick questions. All the directors have assistants, right? Like executive assistants or someone that supports them? No?
Do all of them? I don't know. Some have deputy directors and some have executive assistants and some have neither. Some have one. I don't know off the top of my head though.
And then is this supposed to like serve as like an executive assistant or an administrator for the city administrator?
The deputies?
Yeah.
No, it's not an administrative assistant.
So hearing all that, my first response is it sounds like administration blow, which doesn't, in my view, follow the fiscally responsible, because then it just adds more bureaucracy again. I think that the director should be communicating with the city administrator and be accountable to ensure services are going up to date. They have teams they manage.
Yeah, I think like from a management perspective, if there's 28 direct reports to one person, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So there's one city administrator and there's 28 bureau directors and office managers. That's a lot of direct reports.
I'm just wondering about that proposed number, if we could follow up, sorry.
Yeah, as we get clearer on that, I'm definitely happy to come back and talk more about it. I'm happy to talk about the process, whatever this group is interested in. I see a couple other hands.
Terry?
Hi, thanks Becky. I have a ton of questions along the lines of what you just heard about the deputy administrators and Michael Jordan's memo that announced some of that. Like I've got 7 or 8 questions that are multi-parts. So I'm gonna just send them to you. I do have one significant question relating to sort of what Fred talked about and the fact that, and it goes back to our meeting, our 4th meeting back on June 22nd. Towards the end of the meeting, there was a slide about code 3.02 and the role of GTAC, and part of that role was to give advice. The very next slide was the role of GTAC with respect to the new city organization. And giving advice was not on there. So I asked that question in the chat at that meeting. And then I asked the question specifically to the transition team in writing, and I got an answer on June 16th, I guess, is when it was dated. And basically, the message was, I'll quote, GTAC is not envisioned to deliberate on the city organization efforts. So my question now is a follow-up related to that. And here's the issue for me, and Fred alluded to it, but I'll be just crystal clear about it. This is exactly the stuff GTAC should be deliberating and having comments and advice on. Because this is a reorganization of the entire city bureaucracy by the city bureaucracy. And whether or not we all agree with it or not, it's likely to benefit the city bureaucracy. And the only accountability in this reorganization is to a completely lame duck city council. The accountability to voters in this reorganization is so diminished and attenuated at this point in the city's history that the GTAC, I think, has a really important role of oversight by somebody different than the bureaucracy on this reorganization. So that's where I'm coming from, and I'm pretty serious. Now I can go through the city council resolution that created GTAC and explain why we should be giving advice on the reorganization, but I'm just going to go straight to my question, and that is, what is the rationale by the transition team that GTAC should not be involved? Who made that decision, and how was that decision made?
Appreciate the question and the context that went along with the question. We heard from the mayor's office that in the context of recruiting and selecting members for this commission, they did not have in mind advising on the city organization, on the organizational structure. That's what we heard from the mayor's office. And that was, I believe, what was shared in that memo that you just referenced, Terry.
Well, the mayor's office wasn't mentioned, and you know, it's inconsistent with the language of the resolution that passed unanimously. So I'll give you the written materials on that as well. And I think, you know, if the mayor's office believes that, it's unfortunate.
Can I say something about the process and your comment, Fred, that you made as well, Terry, about the kind of the decision-making in this?
You speak up, please.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I have a tendency to mumble, so thank you for the reminder. I wanted to just speak to the process and the decision-making. So with regard to the organizational structure itself, we talk a lot about sort of the awkwardness of asking bureau directors to weigh in on the future of their colleagues, right? So it's been very clear since the start that Mike is making a recommendation to council. So this is Mike's recommendation to council about the structure of the organization. And all of the conversations are happening in forums that are hosted by the council. So hosted by council offices, so they're not happening just inside of the bureaucracy. I just wanted to clarify that. And then, of course, the decision about whether to accept it or reject it or tweak it or whatever is up to our current city council. Yeah, and you know, hopefully what we can, whenever we're ready to move on, I don't want to rush this part of the conversation. There's a lot that we'd love to talk to you about. We'd love to talk to you about our engagement and communications plans. We'd love to talk to you about change management. I know that was in one of the memos, and that is something that weighs on us a lot, of change management internally to employees. How do we help employees navigate this? And then this came up earlier in the engagement conversation, but helping to communicate externally what the changes are and what that means. And I think mostly the changes that are going to impact community are happening in other parts of the project, but there's, you know, who do you call? That type of thing is deeply relevant. So we'd love to talk with you about that. And then Jamie's going to run through, she has a couple of slides that talk about those things and about the Future Improvements Project, which is a really big opportunity for us to think about changing the services that we provide or changing how we provide the services. The city organization project, we did an overview a couple meetings ago, maybe at your second meeting, is about where we sit when we're providing those services, but it's not about the services that we're providing, right? So the Future Improvements Project is an opportunity to think way bigger, to think about process improvements, to think about like contracting programs or expanding programs, to think about reallocating people, to think about culture change, to think about how we engage with community. That is a huge and deep well of subject matter that I am excited personally to dig into, and that I would really love to engage with this body on. And it's something that we're still trying to figure out how to do, and how it's connected to strategic planning for the city, and how it's connected to all sorts of other things. And so I think at some point we're going to get on your agenda and have some deeper conversation about that work, and how we should even structure it, how we should build that out. And I would really love to engage with you on that. So there's a number of places that I'm very eager to work with you all on.
Thanks, Becky. I think given the time, we've already cut out 15 minutes from this agenda topic. Why don't we take the rest of the questions in writing and allow these guys to do their presentation so that we can talk about the community engagement part.
Okay.
And then if we've got time at the end, we still have one more topic tonight that I know folks want to get to too. So why don't you write your questions down, please, and send them to the co-chairs and Julia, and we'll get them to you all to answer.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Hi, everyone. Jamie Duhamel. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a strategic engagement coordinator with the City Org and Future Improvements Project. We've met many times. Thanks for having us back. It's good to see you again. I really want to talk to you about what our near-term engagement looks like for City Org, and make sure that you're clear on what's happening in this month and what's happening leading up to October. But I'd love to spend the majority of our time talking about the future improvements work and the project, and just start the conversation now on the ground floor about what that engagement should really start, how we should be thinking about that engagement, what we should be starting to plan for, build our capacity for, because as Becky described, it is where the biggest opportunity for real, transformational change to occur lies. And so we really want to be very deeply involved with you along the way. And that includes how do we help our employees through all of this change that, not only the city organizational structure will bring, but all of the charter transition brings to the employees and to the community. So we're going to start, next slide, please, with a conversation about the near-term City Org community engagement strategy. As was mentioned earlier, I've been working with a few members of this committee to really kind of figure out how we get community input on such a short-term basis. As you probably remember, Mike is going to bring a recommended organizational structure to council in October. And so all of our work is really kind of running pell-mell towards that deadline. Which means this is the month we really need to get some input from community. And it was really made clear to us from the beginning when it came to the city organization part of the project that leadership wanted some really high-level North Star understanding of what the community wanted in terms of improved service delivery to community. And we recognized very early that we just didn't have the time and ability to engage deeply and meaningfully with community in a way that we really should if we're going to come to leadership with an understanding of what community wants, right? So instead, what we decided to do is start with a foundation based on all the ways the community has already provided that level of input to the city. So instead of going back out and asking the question once again, we decided to collect various sources from within the community that had already asked those questions, that had already gathered that input. So that instead of asking the question, we could reflect back out what we've been hearing. And so what we created was what we're calling the Community Outcomes Report. It was published today. It was supposed to be published Friday, but it was today. So I'm sure you haven't seen it yet. there are some GTAC members who did get to see the draft and provided input for it, so thank you very much on that. What this report reflects is basically a summary analysis of various sources, including audit services, various audits that they've conducted over the last few years around particular services, recommendations from the Ombudsman's Office, whom, as you know, receives community feedback and makes recommendations for internal changes based on that. It also included over 500 comments that are related to service delivery that were taken during the charter transition, the 2-year charter transition period, and those were all coded. And then it also includes a review and reflection of 2 really large community engagement survey efforts. So the Portland Engagement Project and the, Portland Engagement Project and the Portland Insights Survey. So based on all of that information and reading through all of those things and those comments, we developed these 5 high-level goals that reflect what the community has said to us over and over and over again. And within each of those goals, there are 3 specific outcomes that are reflected under each of them that would really kind of tell the city if we were actually achieving these goals. So I don't have to go over this report in much more detail other than to say what we are trying to work with GTAC on, or what we've been having conversations with some of your GTAC members about, is how do we take this report to community and get additional input if needed. And our original idea was that we would go to community and ask them to help us prioritize amongst all of these different options. But what we heard back very clearly was that is not the right approach, and that instead this was an informational opportunity, an opportunity for us to help community members be prepared for the organizational changes that will be presented to council in October. So we are, next slide. I'm trying to move our slides, but next slide, please. That's okay. So what we are planning for on July 27th is what we're calling a community information session. The agenda has really transitioned from an opportunity to ask community for additional feedback about these high-level goals, and instead talk to them about how we're going to be using this information that they've already given to us and how it relates to organizational structure and future improvements projects. Yeah. The reason why there is a organizational structure example on the screen is just because I wanted to kind of explain that part of what we want to inform community about are the ways in which different cities are structured, and to give some examples of how and why the city is considering the different structures that it is. We don't anticipate having examples to come to community with. This isn't going to be a time for community to weigh in on specifically where they want bureaus to be. Rather, we're going to talk about how those outcomes and goals are reflected in structures, and how the work that comes after those structures is going to be informed by the report as well, or by the information the community has provided to us. Another way that we are going to be using the information that we have gathered in that report is through the development of what we're calling right now an equity assessment tool. We'll probably come up with a better name for that. But essentially what this tool is supposed to be is a way for leadership to make choices between options when they are getting towards the end of this kind of structural conversation. And there's going to be kind of forks in the road. Do we put a bureau here or a program here? How do we weigh what's most important and what reflects most what community would like to see? What sets the best foundation for improved service delivery? What meets our core values the best? And what reflects what employees would like to see? So all of that information we're gathering now, and we plan to turn it into an actual lens that leadership will use to help decide between these options and find the one that best meets those various components. I want to stop talking because I really wanted this to be more of a conversation, and I feel like I've been rambling. So what do you think so far about what we've said? Juanita? Oh, I'm sorry, Lori,
No?
that's your job.
Okay. I'm a little bit in shock. I mean, you know, I'm in shock that you're telling us these things about that you already had the input that you want and you need, and that you consulted with some members of the TAC, the GTAC, and therefore, you know, you're just going to present your ideas in whatever means or way you're going to do it. So I feel like it's a little bit, well, maybe not a little bit, but it's disrespectful to the committee. Again, I understand the thinking and the why this is more convenient and easy to do. But again, my understanding is the committee represents the community. And therefore, when Terry has been told that we cannot give feedback on the city organization because the mayor made that decision, well, I think that we need to have that conversation again, because I don't think that then you really need this committee. You know, I really don't think so, because we're not being taken seriously. And I understand that a lot of the work is just beginning, you know, but there's been a lot of work done, but I understand also that we're going to get moving into more nitty-gritty material and work that needs to be completed. But however, you see, some of my concerns with this, for example, in city organization that I wanted to share with you, is that I read the report from the organizational assessment, and any of that report or you know, and I don't know, I haven't seen this new document that you're presenting, and the lettering is so small I cannot read it either. There's another request that I would like to make, that please, when you present information like this, please make the font larger so we can, it's easier to read. Right now, I have no clue what it says there. But anyway, so there's no mention about what type of program and performance management system is going to be put in place and in which bureau to ensure that there is accountability from the different bureaus as they are meeting or not meeting their goals and objectives. I don't know, I mean, there's obviously has to be a system, a computer system that needs to be, I don't know if you already have one, but if not, it has to be developed, because that's the way to issue reports about how each bureau is doing their work. I don't know if that, I mean, I didn't see that in the management report and description of all of the things that they were looking at. I found that in the city of Detroit. I think that was the only city that had a program and performance management under the chief financial officer, which makes a lot of sense. I was excited about that because actually in some of the information that you presented also out of one of the reports, so many reports or information that we were given, is that there were very positive comments that were made about the Bureau of Technology Services, Project Management Office, and project management was identified as a function from which many bureaus could benefit. You know, and I know that again, this work is in process. So how are we, I want to see, you know, how that compares to the bureaus functioning right now, so we can, you know, again, I really think that we need to have input in these things. And I think that we're going to have to ask for clarification about that, and we need to have that conversation. It's a separate topic. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my comment.
Do you want to provide any feedback on that?
I'll keep it short because I know we're short on time. Thank you, Juanita. I think just a reminder that those programmatic assessment reports were just kind of, they were just, thank you. They were just sort of progress reports about how the conversations are going. They weren't recommendations, nor were they decisions. So there'll be another round of those coming out. We extended the deadline for those till August 4th, I think. So we can send those around as well when they come out from the teams for the phase 2. And I think the question about performance management is a great one, and one that I think is very ripe for future improvements, because there's conversations happening at the city. I always like to say that I'm not trying to stop the conversations at the city and funnel them into this project, that this is an organization that has a million things going on. It's constantly doing process improvement. It's constantly rejiggering itself. It's constantly figuring out how best to operate to serve our communities. That's great. I don't want to stop any of that. I'm going to take some of those things and put them in this project, but those things are marching forward as they should. And for future improvements, what we're talking about doing is figuring out what are all these things that are happening? Can we bolster any of them? Can we highlight any of them? Can we build business cases for them and recommend that they get pursued? So I think performance management is a great example. That's happening. There's conversations happening outside the scope of this project about performance management specific to the bureaus and at the city scale. And I think when we think about the role of the deputy city administrator, there may be some opportunity there. But really, how do we have a robust performance management system at the city of Portland is not something that's going to be addressed by the restructure. It's an incredibly important question, and it's not going to be addressed by city organization. It may be addressed by future improvements, or it may be addressed by the current operations of the city being led by current bureau directors and council members next door.
What do you mean is not going to be addressed by the city organization? That's a critical piece that needs to be incorporated into the organizational chart with a position and a budget.
I think, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's to a lot of challenges that we're facing as a city, right? There's a structural solution and there's a process solution, or there's a budget solution, or there's culture or communication or anything like that. The city organization project right now is working on structural. So where is PBOT going to be? That's the type of question that we're taking up right now. And I'm not saying that that's not an important question. I'm saying that that's something for future improvements, or that's something for the current operations of the city.
Well, but the operation of the city is going to be working within a structure. You know, I mean, you need the structure to be able to operate the city business in an effective and efficient and cost-effective way. And so I apologize, but yeah, what you know, and maybe I'm misunderstanding you too. So
and I might be misunderstanding you too. We can.
I apologize, you know, but I mean, the things that I'm hearing don't make any sense in terms of you know, what you were talking about, management and organizational structures and, you know, budgets and all of that, and accountability precisely. But anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Juanita.
Yeah, I think accountability for this project is deeply important and definitely related to the project. City performance writ large, I think, is a different question. But Juanita, I don't know if we can, maybe we talk offline or something.
Yeah, I think that's in order to get a couple
Yeah,
more comments
through
in.
the
Why don't we do that?
queue.
And I'm going to skip down to Amy because we didn't get to hear from her last time. Did you have a new question?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we do Amy? since we haven't
Well,
heard
my
from her.
question persists. I wholeheartedly agree with Terry's comment about the bureaucracy needing checks and balances, and GTAC being most appropriately positioned to give that feedback. So just full-heartedly appreciate that comment. My question is around the media strategy that hasn't been included, and well, that might be a farther down the line. For example, for this July 27th meeting, what opportunities have been made? What I know that there's flyers and some kind of outreach like that, but is there any media connections? Because this is something where we watched the narrative go one way with the district, with the salary commission. And it was very unfortunate. There's no reason that that should have been the media narrative. That's very much something our professional communication staff could head off. And that looks like media relationships. So I just want to say vocally that that's a missed opportunity.
I appreciate that. And we did explore that with our communications team, and it was the opinion of our media experts that the media was not interested in this particular story at this particular time.
Respectfully make it a story. It is a story. It is something that they need to be driving in that narrative, and that is their absolute jobs. As a media specialist, I'm aware, and I'm not aware of any communications plan policy that wouldn't involve the local media on these matters.
I haven't seen a word about it in any paper I've been checking.
Yeah, there's
almost
zero
daily.
proactive coverage. So
You can carry
just,
that back.
yeah.
And let them know. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of work. Destiny?
Yes, thank you, Amy. Again, and following what Juanita said and what Terry has said, Fred, I think what we're all saying is we're getting feedback. I mean, you said there's been so much feedback giving, but I'm concerned. I didn't know that Terry got that the mayor does not want our advice. Then why are we here? Juanita was very spot on that it's very disrespectful. I feel like what Amy's saying, it should be accountability, this bureaucracy, this unaccountability of paid work that's happening by taxpayers and the feedback that's in those comments should really allow us to be more advice driven. And if you're taking advices and providing lenses, what is the outcomes that are happening? Like, I really don't understand what's being responsive about all of it. Like the salary, those are really negative comments. And like, I know you're not all responsible, but like, I would like to see what's being addressed afterwards. Our comments about the media engaging the public on a local media lens, how is that gonna play out? Is your team gonna take it? Because it seems like there is a disconnect between where we can work and where your team is working, where the city is working, where that work is headed. And I feel like if we're really gonna advise, we need some outcomes, because suggestions without outcomes is a waste of time and space. This is a lot of concern, and I think this is a great opportunity where we're all really just wanting to see positive outcomes. And if we drop the ball, this is gonna really deter a lot of, voters.
Thank you.
Joe?
I think all of this is illustrating two things. One is, I think this is the right group to be advising on the virtually every aspect of the transition. We were selected because we've got a pretty incredible diversity, not only of lived experience, but professional expertise, perspectives, exactly what you need to be advising the city on this transition. And that's what most of us thought we were doing here. But the second is, this format isn't very effective for doing that. And, we've talked again and again about the importance of dividing into subcommittees or small work groups. And Juanita, I don't know whether I heard you correctly, but the little group that was referred to earlier, which I think everybody was invited to participate in, spent 3 hours with Jamie talking very specifically about how to present that particular information that's in the report that others haven't had a chance to read yet. But that outcomes report with those 5 different values, how to interact with the community regarding that. And that specific task, which is a very small one, involved 4 or 5 of us for probably 5 hours each. And if we're going to meet in the whole group every other week, we're not going to be able to get very far. I think we really need to divide into work groups to address the full range of things that we believe that we ought to be advising on.
I also want to add that was actually the 3rd or 4th meeting about that very topic that we've had over the last couple of months.
Thank you.
And I invited the people who signed up on the sign up list that wanted to be part of that conversation. So I deeply apologize if people feel left out of that conversation. We're bringing people in who have indicated that they want to be part of it. And now I'm just trying to report out what was made from, what was decided in those meetings. We had a very different plan going into that meeting. I think Fred can attest. I pushed very hard for an engagement strategy, and we heard very clearly from GTAC that it was the wrong approach and that we needed to be doing an information session and preparing the community for the organizational structure changes that were coming to October. So that's what we're doing. I really hope you know that we are trying to be responsive. Given the boundaries that we've been given by the mayor's office, we are trying to be responsive to the input that you're giving us and really adjust our strategy based on that. So everything you're providing to us today, we will also take back, think deeply about it, and figure out how we can integrate that stuff into the work that we're doing.
Thank you. Got about 5 more minutes. Terry?
I'll be really quick. There was a mention in the chat, like, did this committee report out? And I guess this is kind of the report out. But I wanted to come back to the June 27th meeting and then what I said earlier. And the Sacramento org chart here is going to make my point for me. But what's going on here is we have a deadline in October for the city council to basically vote on an org chart and vote on a budget to support that org chart. And that's going to include deputy administrators, you know, all of this initial city organization. So the idea, I think, coming out of our meeting was to start engaging the public on what org charts look like, and let them know early and meaningfully what that input needs to look like and to whom the input goes. So what is awkward about this is that we can't put up the org chart that's going to be proposed by the new city organization people because we're not allowed to have input in that. We don't know what those decisions are looking like or how they're reaching those decisions. But I guarantee you, you put up a city organization org chart for Sacramento, you're going to get public comment on the org chart of Sacramento and what they like about it and don't like about it. And delivery is being provided to services. I mean, it's a wasted step, but that is apparently the step that we have to take. But the idea here is, and I think we should support, is that the engagement needs to be directed towards that council meeting in October. If the public wants to have an impact, that's the impact point, and we will give them whatever information we have on July 27th, and continue to give them more information as it comes out. But that's I think the approach of the information and engagement in this area. That's my reading of the committee, and that would be how I would have.
So I'm wondering if we should use committee time now while we're all here. I mean, there's a lot of feedback here on the chat and in the room about wanting to more formally request to the mayor that we have input on the city organization. So I think we've had a lot of discussion on it. Do we want to move that, unless there's more discussion?
Well, can I ask a clarifying question?
You speak up, Zach.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So this deadline of October of setting city organization, that is not being written to the extent of code where city administrator comes in and has an opportunity with an elected mayor that can direct the city administrator of how the city organization should look with public feedback. So my question is, October seems like a deadline for maybe putting in motion so that people who are running for mayor, or when we think about hiring a city administrator, they might have some idea of what they're walking themselves into. But that is a flexible output. Is that true? Or is this like coded, done in October, and then it requires significant work to do any changes?
October is budget driven because we have an 18-month annual budget process at the city. And in order to inform some very specific, they're called CAL targets. I couldn't tell you what that acronym is, I apologize. But basically projections for the bureaus to propose their budgets that go into the mayor's proposed. They need to have the information. They would prefer to have it now, but we pushed back and said we need some time to actually think about what the structure should be. So it's really, if we're gonna have the budget proposed in time for council consideration in the spring for adoption for the next fiscal year 24-25, which includes January of 25, when the new form of government comes into place. Working backwards, we have to have some decisions for council by October, but it will not be codified. It'll be in the form of a resolution. The resolution will say, here's an org chart that feels implementable from a technical standpoint. The technical implementation, the lift required is massive. We have a project manager on board who is trying to wrap her arms around all of the moving parts, budget, SAP, HR, technology, facilities, et cetera. And then another part of that is code. So the resolution will include this implementable org chart and then some other thoughts about priority things that are not, included in the implementable org chart, because our unit of analysis is program level and higher, program level as in program offer in the budget. So I'm getting far afield here, but we will bring back conforming legislation in the form of code updates later. So it won't be written in stone. And in fact, it's never really gonna be written in stone, right? We're an organization constantly evolving, but the action in October will be a resolution and the code will come later. Did that answer your question of why October?
It does answer my question. So just to be clear, this is really a question about how are we going to identify and budget FTEs that could be deputy city administrators and or like whatever reconfiguration for melding bureaus. But there's not like, I guess my point is, what I'm hoping to make is that there are ample opportunities beyond October where we can be advising the mayor, who will be at large and in direction of the city administrator in the professional city organization. And that is not so rigid that we can lose sight of the opportunity to do your phase 2, phase 3 evolution and
Yes.
improving outcomes.
And I think in the future improvements project, and then for that matter, when the new elected officials and new city administrator come on board, there's gonna be room for continual evolution. And I think I mentioned the program level thing because even if we wanted to say, okay, everybody who does community engagement, you're now gonna sit in one place, we couldn't do it. Let's say, even if we wanted to do that, that is not something, and I'm not saying that we do, I'm just using that as an illustrative example. Because we have the building blocks of the program offers to work with, we're quite limited in the changes that we're gonna be able to make right now. But the opportunity to think about, hey, would that actually serve the organization in serving the community to have all the engagement people sitting in one place? We don't have to debate that right now. Again, I have no perspective on that. Then we could have that conversation with community, with employees, with leadership, with elected officials and say, okay, if that's something that we want to pursue, it's going to be a pretty heavy lift, but if it's going to, help us deliver on our services and be responsive to community, then let's do it. But that's not something that we're doing right now. That's definitely something that there will be lots more community engagement on, lots more conversations with all the relevant stakeholders about that. So yeah, it will not, none of this is set in stone. And then also it's gonna be pretty high level changes. So the deeper, more transformational changes will have to come later.
Can I also, because I know that you want to do a movement to like have maybe a work group.
I
have
actually don't necessarily need to do a movement.
Oh,
I
okay.
just am hearing so much feedback. So I think your clarifying questions are really helpful. So-
I have just a feedback or comment on some of the other discussion and the response that you had about deputy city administrators. First of all, just about every single large city organization has deputy administrators. It's absolutely imperative with that many reporting. But you can have very prescriptive ways, like this example of City of Sacramento. Then you offered a very intriguing suggestion, which is a more horizontal. And just from my personal experience working in the mayor's office, working in City Hall, that would greatly improve the ability for bureaus to work together on some of our most challenging problems. So I'm thinking about homelessness, which touches on public safety, it touches on housing, it touches on all these kind of like what the mayor has described as their little like buckets. If you had a city administrator who has the authority to work across those, you have so much more, you have the ability to be so much more effective. So while I do acknowledge that there is a reaction and a just reaction to levels of bureaucracy, the levels of bureaucracy that exist in the city of Portland exist, and they maybe are just subsumed under what city council looks like. And you think, okay, well, yeah, the mayor has these and you have direct reporting, but if you actually want to get anything done, you have to work across other bureaus, and that is a level of bureaucracy that includes political bureaucracy, which is incredibly difficult to do anything. So I'll stop, but I do recognize that there's this great opportunity of thinking more holistically about what deputy administrators look like, and I strongly want the city to consider that.
Do you mind if I make a reflection based on that? I really appreciate that comment, Zach, because I think what a lot of times community, and I'm the same way, I'm learning this stuff as we go, that community doesn't quite understand is that because we've been functioning so dysfunctionally for so long, that a lot of these changes are really us catching up to the ways in which functional governments have been operating for a long time. So it feels like a lot and it feels like, you know, it's way too much. The salaries are the same way. The salaries are a huge jump from where they currently are, but they are right in the middle of what every other city with those same exact roles are. They are compared to other cities of the same size with the same roles. They are very similar. We are catching up because the current council hadn't been paid in the same way that other cities have for a really long time. So I guess I just want to offer that reflection. It doesn't mean that these reactions aren't valid and real and we have to remember them and keep them in consideration. But I also am hoping that you also think about all of the kind of like change feels so big because we've been so far down for so long, if that makes sense.
I wanted to share one more reflection too briefly, which is correcting when I said before that transformational change is going to come in future improvements. I want to correct that. The real transformational change is going to be the addition of a city administrator. And that was determined by the ballot. That is going to be a huge difference for us and our ability to work at cross purposes, work together and solve problems more holistically. I mean, I can't, understate the amount of impact that that's going to have. So I'm, excited for it. And that was decided, on the ballot.
All right, so the question that was out there was our ability to influence input on the city organization. And I think we've heard, we're not talking about processes. We're not talking about additional underlay. It's just the city organization, how they are going to organize the different bureaus. That's the part that we are not providing input to. And I'm hearing there's a request to perhaps either hear from the mayor's office or the transition team, I guess above you. The why, is that something, am I hearing that right? And is that something that someone wants to move, that we put a request to hear more about why GTAC is not being included in that feedback?
I'll make that motion, that we have the mayor himself or his executive assistant or whoever made that decision in his stead, Mr. Wheeler's stead, come before the committee and explain it, and tell us how it furthers the transparency of the city's government as it progresses towards this momentous transition.
Anyone like to second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed?
Well, I'd like to ask a question. I don't think we ought to specify who we want to come speak with us. I think what we ought to ask for is the appropriate decision maker, whoever that is, to come. It may or may not be the mayor, it may or may not be the city
I
administrator.
said that was included in my motion, Joe. To my motion, that was included. I said either the mayor or the executive assistant or the person who made the decision.
Yeah, I'd rather eliminate the first two and just say the person who's responsible for that decision.
I don't accept that as a friendly amendment.
Well, it was sold to the committee as it was an edict from the mayor. So it was either the mayor or his executive assistant. Or it was not that, and then is a different person. So I would support
It does
those.
not suffice to hear from the transition team. We hear from them all regularly.
To
We need to-
clarify, it was from the mayor's office. It was in the evaluation of the applications. Had a specific scope of work in mind that did not include the city organization.
Was that somebody in the, so if we said the mayor's office, it would get to that.
What I heard from the mayor's office was that in the evaluation of the applications, that was not considered part of the scope of work.
Okay, so could we get that individual or that decision maker?
Anyone in the mayor's office.
I can't speak for them, but
Right. I think we understood your motion. If everybody on the screen could put their hands down,
So you can read.
and then we've had a motion and a second. Now, if folks would like to say aye with their hands up. Okay, I see 11 hands up. Okay, and then those that put your hands down. And those that say, let's see, is there a reaction for no? I guess you can put your hands up for no. Raise hand. All right. Okay, so the motion has passed. Is there someone that is going to, Fred, or is someone going to volunteer to put that letter together?
I can if Juanita will help me.
Sure.
Thank you.
If you can get that to the co-chairs and Julia in the next week. I think, well, it'd be good to do it in the next couple of days, so that
Yeah.
maybe we can get a response before the next meeting.
Right.
That's it.
Next Tuesday.
So we'll do our best. Good. All right. Thanks for the discussion.
Sorry, you're just.
We are actually just about out of time. The last agenda topic on there was talking about input. I think if you read the slide, it's fairly self-explanatory. I don't know that it answered what we just talked about today. So, but you can see in general there, I'll just summarize that when you provide feedback, we get a lot of emails. And I want you to know that we listen and look at all of them. And if it's pertinent, we make sure it's an agenda item. We direct it to the topic owner so that they're ready to discuss it. If it's out of scope, we look to see, is there a way for us to have an agenda item? Or we direct it to, thank you. Some things are related to the charter and that we direct back to say, hey, that's already been decided by the charter. And if it's none of the above, which is about half of them, we discuss. So Julia, David and I and the future co-chairs, we are meeting a couple times a week to talk about the inputs and what we can do with them and how we can get them to the city. And be sure to look at the GTAC request folder. And if you sort it by date, you can see things coming in, and Julia brings our attention to it, but all of those are responses to questions that folks are asking. And I encourage you to read that information. There is a lot of good information in there about different city administration, the assessments that have been done. There's summaries of those assessments and the outcomes of those. So there's a lot of good information. I think answers a lot of the questions that we talk about in here. So I encourage you to take a look at that. I think that's part of the hours that we've signed up for, is that kind of homework, is keeping ourselves up to date with all that information. And I'm sorry, there's not a lot of time for questions on that one. If you have questions, send us an email. And we can see if we can put some more time on the agenda for that. You want to go to the next slide, please? Gets meetings recorded and posted on the committee's website. Our next meeting is next Tuesday. And that's just because of vacation schedules. That's why we're calling next Tuesday. We don't have another one until the middle of August because a lot of folks are out. And the next slide, did I have anything else? It's just an upcoming schedule. Oh, the upcoming schedule, yes. So the next meeting, we've got a public officials and public meetings training. The council work session debrief. So 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, David and I got a chance to join the transition team with city council. Hopefully folks have taken a look at that. If you haven't, I encourage you to at least get towards the end of it and listen to the comments from the city councilors. I think that's really informative to understand what they were interested in.
Great questions.
Yeah, great questions, really interesting. I also really think it was helpful to listen to the whole transition team present kind of their area of expertise. Gave you kind of some nuances that we hear in here, but maybe a different angle. And I think it was really helpful to hear the whole thing at once. And I think it's I don't know, an hour investment of your time. So I think it's
2 hours.
2 hours with the comments and all. I think the presentation was under an hour. Yeah.
It was about an hour
About
each,
an hour.
yeah, hour presentation, hour.
Okay, 2
questions.
hours. It was helpful. So we'll have time to debrief on that in here. And then we're also going to get the transition status updates and the measures of success and the budget. Julia sent out an email last week that kind of pointed you to those, and we've already received a lot of feedback on those. So thank you. And we'll make sure the presenters have that information, and we'll see that in here from the transition team next week. So with that, we're just at time. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks. Thank you.